Hello there, and welcome to Restoration Messianic Fellowship and the Counting of the Omer 2026. Here is the blessing for the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzvanu al safarat ha'omer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and has commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. So hayom esrim yom shechem, shenei shavuot v'shisha Yamim LaOmer. Today is 20 days, which is 2 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. So, with that, we are continuing the breakdown or run through of the statement of beliefs that we recently posted for restoration. I hope you've been getting some good things out of this and the discussion. The previous one ended. Remember, at the very beginning, I mentioned that this is more of a progression of thought rather than just a systematic statement of belief. So the last one ended, number 4 ended, where I say, in redeeming humanity, all of creation will be restored, and the presence of God on earth and access to the tree of life will be returned. So from that goal of God, number 5 says that, and I'm going to try to read this without interruption because it's somewhat self-explanatory, but it's about the covenants. So with the goal in mind of redemption and restoration, says the covenants laid out in the Torah and prophets are God's explanation and mechanism for accomplishing this goal. Believers must proceed through the covenants in their proper order. Our redemption takes place under the terms of the Abrahamic covenant, which is why Abraham is our example of faith. The Mosaic covenant represents our sanctification and is meant only for a redeemed people whom Adonai is showing how to live a holy life pleasing to him. Works of Torah are the fruit of redemption and in no way establish or earn salvation. The future glorification in the Messianic kingdom is represented in the Davidic covenant, when the king is on the throne in Jerusalem. All of these covenants are fulfilled when the new covenant, as described in Jeremiah 31 through 34, is fully implemented. The new covenant was inaugurated and ratified at Yeshua's last Passover meal with his disciples and the shed blood of the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. It will be fully implemented upon his return in power and glory, when the words Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, resound from his people. Paul states in Galatians chapter 3, 15 and 17, Brothers and sisters, I speak in human terms. Even with a man's covenant, once it has been confirmed, no one cancels it or adds to it. This statement from Paul here is essential to understanding the workings of covenant and how they continue operating even in the New Testament era. Verse 17 says, What I am saying is this, Torah, which came 430 years later, 430 years after the Abrahamic covenant, does not cancel the covenant previously confirmed by God so as to make the promise ineffective. That whole statement is essential. It says he clearly states that the Mosaic covenant does not cancel the Abrahamic because it was properly ratified. It was legal. In the same way, the Davidic does not cancel either the Mosaic or Abrahamic for the same reason. Likewise, the New Covenant does not cancel or nullify any of the previous, because they too were properly ratified and legal. Therefore, all New Covenant believers in Messiah who come to Yeshua by faith, whether Jew or Gentile, are participating in and agreeing to all of the previous covenants. Every believer, whether fully understood or not, have taken an oath of loyalty to their king and agreed to live by the king's laws as if saying, everything he says we will do. All right, I have to back up on that, and I was biting my tongue quite often. But the opening paragraph, the covenants laid out in the Torah and the prophets are God's explanation and mechanism for accomplishing the goal of redeeming and restoring his people, and going from the beginning of Genesis all the way to the end of Revelation, the covenants is what is governing what is happening with his people. Now, believers must proceed through the covenants in their proper order. This goes to a lot of the discussion that Paul is having in Romans and in others. That's what I'm teaching through right now is the book of Romans. Because the Judaizers, or those who were trying to, of the circumcision group, those who were trying to make the Gentiles go through that conversion process, overall called circumcision, they were trying to put the covenants out of order. They wanted them to come to Messiah in and through the Mosaic covenant. You had to be keeping the Torah, and then maybe, you can go to Messiah after that if you really want to. And Paul is arguing all this whole time. It's like, no, Abraham is our example of faith. Our redemption takes place under the terms of the Abrahamic covenant, which is why Abraham is our example of faith. And we say that, the Abrahamic covenant is what is in effect when the Exodus takes place. It's the covenant that is operating when Moses leads all of the people and leads the people in the redemption process from Egypt. And of course, who is the high priest that officiates over that covenant? Well, it's Melchizedek, the king of righteousness. That happens officially. He brings, when he comes and meets with Abraham after he is rescuing Lot and others, he comes bringing bread and wine. So he is introducing the covenant meal for this whole process that takes place in Genesis chapter 15. When Abraham is there, that God comes to him and says, I'm the one that brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees in order to give you this land to inherit it. And he's starting to talk about, well, how am I going to know about these things? And he tells him to bring those animals, and he cuts them in half. He put each piece opposite the other. Says, when the sun was about to set and the deep sleep fell on Abraham, behold, terror of great darkness was falling upon him. Then Adonai, then actually the Memra, said to Abram, know for certain that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But I am going to judge the nation that they will serve. Afterward they will go out with many possessions. So he describes the Exodus as he is inaugurating the Abrahamic covenant. But you will come to your fathers in peace, and you will be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun set and it became dark, behold, there was a smoking oven and a fiery torch that passed between the pieces. And on that day Adonai cut a covenant with Abram, saying, I give this land to your seed from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. So that is the beginning of the Abrahamic covenant. But again, all of that is happening, all of the redemption takes place under these terms of the Abrahamic covenant. And so it's because Abraham also, he believed God, he believed in the Memra of the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So we are supposed to have faith like Abraham. And then as we believe and we have faith, we are justified. The Abrahamic covenant is a picture of justification. Then we pass through the waters, just like the Israelites did at the Red Sea. They would pass through the waters of immersion or baptism, and then they approach the mountain. Then they approach the Mount Sinai, and that's when the Torah is given to them. So the Torah is given to an already redeemed people. You have to proceed through that order. And that's necessary. All of these things have to take place in their proper order, for God is a God of order. So the Mosaic covenant is given to this redeemed people. He didn't give it to them while they were still slaves in Egypt and say, hey, you guys keep this covenant, you guys keep this Torah, and if you do it right, do it perfectly, then I'll get you out. No, that's not how it works. They believed, they trusted in putting the blood over the doorposts would protect them, and they would be led out by God. And so he does. And so the Mosaic covenant is representing their sanctification to show this newly redeemed people how to live and how to bring this mixed multitude of people and make them into one nation. Because everything that happens in the lives of the patriarchs is supposed to be picturesque of what is going to happen in his descendants later. That's a very traditional Jewish understanding of things. So the Mosaic shows a holy life, what is pleasing to him, and so keeping the Torah, works of Torah, are the fruit of redemption. And when you read about the sacrifices, when you read about all of those things that are there in the Mosaic, those are about maintaining a relationship that has already been established. And you don't appear before your king empty-handed. Of course, the Davidic kingdom is a picture of our glorification. When Messiah has come to establish his kingdom, he is sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. And again, all of these are fully accomplished in the new covenant. And we grew up at least calling ourselves New Covenant Christians, and we believe that the new covenant has been inaugurated, it has been kicked off, but it is not fully implemented yet. And we see that even in Hebrews. One of the more troublesome passages or difficult passages is that one in Hebrews chapter 8, I believe. Talking about Yeshua being has obtained a more excellent ministry, is insofar as he is mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. Right? This is a familiar passage that a lot of people actually try to use against some of our perspectives, but in fact it actually teaches the opposite. He says, "For if that first one had been faultless, there would not have been discourse seeking a second." So there was a problem with the Mosaic covenant in that we were still in our fallen and broken nature. Because verse 8 says, of Hebrews 8, says, "For finding fault with them." He didn't find fault with the Torah. He didn't find fault with the law of God or the terms that were given on Mount Sinai. The problem still existed within the flesh, within human beings. "For finding fault with them," he says, "Behold, days are coming when I will inaugurate a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. And it will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand." This is quoting Jeremiah 31. "To lead them out of the land of Egypt, for they did not remain in my covenant, though I was a husband to them, or I did not care for them, says Adonai. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Adonai." He says, "I will put my Torah," those terms that were given on Mount Sinai, "I will put my law into their mind and upon their hearts. I will write it." So the same place he had intended it to be all along. "And I will be their God, and they shall be my people." So he is putting the terms which are, as Paul says in Romans 7, holy, righteous, and good. The Torah is. He's putting those things on the new heart, on the heart of flesh, not the heart of stone. And then the chapter ends by saying, in saying new, he has treated the first as old, but what is being made old and aging is close to vanishing. Some King James and others might use the term obsolete, but that's an interpretation. It's being made old, but it is not fully old yet. It is old and aging, yes. It is transitioning, yes. And it is close to vanishing, but it has not vanished yet. So all of those things, but we have not fully implemented the new covenant at this time. So we are still governed under those other ones as we are moving towards the new covenant. And so we are still waiting for the full implementation of that. And that's why the the discussion from Galatians 3 becomes so important, where he says, even with a man's covenant, once it has been confirmed, once it is legal, once it is ratified, and the parties have agreed and it's sealed, no one cancels it or adds to it. That works even on a human level, and Paul is saying that is even more so between God and man. He says, what I'm saying is this: Torah, the law, Mount Sinai, the Mosaic covenant, which came 430 years later after the Abrahamic covenant, does not cancel the covenant previously confirmed by God so as to make the promise ineffective. So the Mosaic covenant, which came later, does not negate the Abrahamic covenant, nor does it change the mechanism, nor does it change the promise, nor does it nullify any of those things. We enter into relationship with God by faith. So that is the law. That is the truism of covenants that he is trying to get across. A properly ratified covenant is not going to be negated by the one that comes later. Rather, that one is going to build upon what came before. So that means the Davidic covenant, which came after the Mosaic covenant, does not nullify the Mosaic, nor does it nullify the Abrahamic. And that means that the new covenant, which came after that, does not cancel, does not nullify any of the previous. Rather, when the new covenant is fully implemented, all of those are established and set. So we, as believers, must progress through all of the covenants. We come to God by faith, our redemption under the terms of the Abrahamic covenant with our high priest Melchizedek, whom is Yeshua is high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So we come to faith through that Abrahamic covenant. We approach the mountain and we are agreeing to the terms of what is holiness, what is sin, what needs to change in my life, how do I live a holy and pleasing life to you, this is going to be the law of the king for his kingdom. And so we are like the people there. This is not just for you who are standing here today, but for all those who are not here today. And so we are, by faith, we are all saying everything that the Lord says we will do and obey. And then from there, we come before our King and pledge our loyalty to him in the Davidic covenant, and he promises to raise us from the dead. He promises to glorify these natural bodies. He promises to fully and completely remove the sin from our lives. So that is the gospel account of our justification, our sanctification, and our glorification. And the covenants explain all of those things. And without a working knowledge of how the covenants govern this world right now, we don't fully understand what's happening through in this world, in the salvation process. That's why we get so mixed up and wonder, what is our relationship to the Torah? What is legalism? All those other types of things. We ask all sorts of questions because we put things out of order. Even the Jewish people in the days of Yeshua, when he was here, were trying to get things out of order. Entering and starting with Abraham wasn't necessarily the most important thing, and redemption was not the most important thing. They wanted to skip the redemption process. They wanted to skip the removing of sin process. They wanted to skip the Messiah, son of Joseph, the suffering servant, and skip all the way to the Davidic covenant, and which is the king on the throne, the Messiah, son of David, in power and glory. They wanted to skip what was necessary in the redemption process, in the Abrahamic covenant, and that creates a problem. If Yeshua had come and was going to establish his kingdom in that first century, without having gone to the cross, without having been raised from the dead, without removing our sins, then when the king is on the throne and he is dividing the sheep from the goats, well, we would all still be in our sin, and so everybody would be a goat. There would not be people saved because we would all still be in our sin. So the process needed to take place of redemption, sanctification, and that has to happen before we get to glorification. And the covenants are essential to understanding that point. So I know I've talked a lot and kind of rambled a bit. Believe me, we could go on for a long time on this particular point because it is one of the most important. So with that, I'm going to say good night and shalom to everyone. By all means, we'd love to see you on some Shabbat at 1 o'clock on Saturdays in Morristown. Y'all have a good night.